discuss India's evolution as a global actor. At 75, its dynamic evolution, its role in various issues from climate change to humanitarian crisis to global peace, its development in the technology sector, its pathways that will impact all of you and all of us. It will also discuss global assessments of where India is, global expectations from India, and perhaps how does India work with its key partners in the days ahead. To get this started, let me first turn to my friend Jeff Smith. Jeff, India at 75. What does that evoke? What does India at 75 mean for you as a global partner of India, as someone who's been watching India, as someone who's been writing on India?
Thank you, Samir, for having me.
And I will request all the speakers to bring the mic as close to their mouth as possible.
Okay.
Because the YouTube folks have been cribbing since yesterday that the audio is bad, so bring it close to you.
It's an honor to be on such a distinguished panel. When I think of India at 75, what stands out most to me is that it's become a responsible international actor. You know, international relations theory tells us that when a country so large rises so quickly, traditionally it's been a destabilizing phenomenon. And China has in some way proved these realist theorists correct in the way it's been acting more belligerently, with more nationalism, aggressive in its territorial disputes. It's fairly remarkable that India has risen the geopolitical hierarchy so quickly. It was the 10th largest military spender in the world in 2009. Today it's the 3rd. If China had not overshadowed its rise, all we would be talking about is how quickly India has risen. And yet it hasn't become a destabilizing international actor. In fact, I would argue it's become more responsible. It's not aggressively seeking to redress historical grievances. It's not bullying its neighbors. It's not seeking to reclaim lost territory. In fact, it's settling its disputes responsibly in international forums. It's being more magnanimous in its neighborhood. It's treating its neighbors more kindly than it had in the past. It is defending the rules-based order. It's being a good partner to the West. It's being courted by international capitals across the world. And so, to me, I think that this has been a remarkable phenomenon in the way it has contributed to regional and global stability, and it's something to be applauded. That, to me, is the most remarkable thing about India at 75.
Jeff, clearly you are in a minority, right? If you open a New York Times newspaper or a Washington Post or any other medium, you see write-ups that could be disturbing, to say the least. So, what is the assessment? How does India respond to the United States when it sees these multiple messages coming at it?
Well, first of all, as someone who works at a conservative think tank, criticism from the New York Times is no surprise. It's something we're very familiar with. And you have to understand that Western criticism, particularly in the liberal media, is not unusual. But I think it's very important to distinguish between criticism in the free press and government policy. And if you look at U.S. government policy consistently across multiple administrations, bipartisan administrations, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, they have been consistent in pursuing stronger ties with India. Most of the criticism, whether it's in the U.S. or internationally, has been of Indian domestic policy. But very few have criticized India's international policy. And everyone wants to do more business with India. I would argue everyone does. The US does, Europe, Africa, Latin America. I would argue even India's rivals want to do more business with India. Even China would like to do more business with India, just not on terms that are acceptable to India. And so when you actually look at government policy, India is being courted by a wider number of capitals than perhaps any other country. And sometimes we need to separate the noise in the press from real government policy.
Well, let me pose a similar question to you. Sitting in Austria, in Europe, when you say India, what does that really evoke in folks in the strategic circles and perhaps even on the street? How is India assessed today? India at 75. What are your expectations? What are the attributes that come to mind? And how do you see India as a partner?
I would start by differentiating between my personal knowledge and my personal perception while dealing with India for such a long time, and of course then what kind of perception Europe has about India, which is obviously also shifting in positive terms. And in general terms, these two last years have brought one positive image, one positive story, actually, if I look at the relations between Europe and India. And that is the story, or let's say the watershed moment in the relations, the realization we need to do more in bilateral and in multilateral terms. This was definitely a watershed moment in the understanding about how important India has become for the global order, for the so-called rules-based order that the European Union and the European member states actually want to see strengthened. And also there is this realization on the side of European decision makers, both in the institutions and in the member states, that both Europe and India do not want to be caught in a binary world, given the deepening systemic competition between the United States and China. There may be a third way for Europe and India. A third way would mean equidistance, would mean that both could actually build an own center of trading power and could actually have an own story to tell. Now, when it comes to my personal understanding, I also have witnessed a huge development in positive terms. Just if I think about the beginning of 2000, there was no real interest in India, more or less. There were, of course, scholars and exchanges, student programs, but as a young student dealing with South Asia and with India, actually I was quite frustrated that the political elites were not really interested in the relations. This has definitely changed. When it comes to people relations, I think that both share a very similar positive perception about each other, and this is going to grow further.
Gillian, I'll come back to you with another question to look ahead, and I'll come back to you. But let me now turn to Prime Minister Harper. So 2 years ago, on this very stage, you had made a bold statement that India is going to define itself.